with very, very close games that felt like a winnable series for them at multiple points, but unfortunately not the position that they find themselves in. So they're really going to need to throw it all down today, otherwise, well, they're going to be going home and back down into Division 2. Not too long a stay in Div 1. But Carvis, we were sort of talking about these teams a little bit in the green room, and there really is a big sort of contrast in styles and what we can expect to see hitting the Rift.
There is. It's really comfort versus flexibility when it comes to these two teams. The 42 team is so flexible, playing AD carries in the mid lane, playing Ziggs down on the bot side of the map, probably even mid if they're able to, playing mages on the top side. The AP pool that Virtuoso is bringing to the table with Gragas, with Aurora, with Ryze is so difficult to deal with. And it's really only Balmy who's kind of stuck in this awkward zone of Jarvan and anything that engages. While on the side of Blue-Whites, they have very small champion pools and they have very designated roles when it comes to their playstyle. It is MKR and Bomber on the carries and everyone else trying their best to support these two.
Yeah, and I did like that you sort of brought that focus up to Virtuoso in the top lane, his ability to whack out those carries, because his opposite number in Veloxa, what we've seen from him in Div 1 has been pretty much just tank play. And obviously Blue-Whites, they found themselves in relegation, so it didn't go great for all of them, but Veloxa, definitely a player that I think struggled potentially more than most, and if you're a tank player going up against someone that is a bit more inclined towards those carries, that can be a little bit of an issue that your team's going to need to play around.
Yeah, and again, Veloxa, of course, not playing only the tanks. We've seen, even in the recent games, he's been bringing out the cannon quite a bit when it comes to just overall lane pressure and bringing some more of that AP damage and the flanks, bringing the team fighting to another level just from the straight regular old front to back style. But it's still going to be painful if you play against these Auroras and you can't bring out things like Camille or something that can punish with the jungler. And with the amount of time that they have to practice when it comes to these relegation series, I'm not sure if they can. They might just have to try and play with their comfort, as we already talked about.
Yeah, it's a very strange setup for a tournament. I suppose it's just the nature of relegations and where it has to fit in the schedule, where you've got this sort of long break between the end of the regular split and then the relegations. Then you've got a load of games coming at you very thick and fast, so your ability to adapt series to series is really being tested.
Yeah. And speaking about that adaptability, there is one player on Blue-Whites who I am expecting to be able to do that, and that is Bomber in the mid lane.
Yeah.
By far the most champions played, like just overall when it comes to the seasons that he's played in. He plays assassins like Akali, like Yone. He can bring out the AD carries, like we saw two very good Corki games. Even though Corki has been recently falling off a bit when it comes to win rate. I think he's 0-10 in the LCK from the past 10 games. And he can just bring out really anything. Orianna, Syndra, regular mages, Azir, one of his best picks. There's just a ton that he can bring out against JJ in the mid lane. And that's where I'm looking at where Blue-Whites can maybe start snowballing the game out a little bit, playing around this Finnish mid lane that has been very good in the laning phase.
See, Carvis, I'm hearing about this boy champion pool. Syndra, Orianna, Azir. Those are all champions that I would normally expect to be going into the mid lane, but his opposite number in JJ, I think, is a lot more willing to engage in the weird and the wonderful and the wild stuff like the Xayah mid lane, which is absolutely ridiculous as a counter to the Yone, pulling out Renekton as well, and really operating as a player that can fulfill multiple roles within this 42 gaming squad. Sort of, I guess, the poster boy for their entire style, where you don't really know what they're going to be picking until you load onto the Rift.
Yeah, and you bring out the Renekton. What about the Garen? Like, even without the Nasus mid lane, he brings out the Garen mid as a counter. JG's a mad lad. That's all you can really say about him. And that's why I kind of brought out the adaptability, where he can counter these things with things like, for example, Cassiopeia, that has been brought out a couple of times by Bomber in the past. Of course, this is a full Finnish roster. I'm Finnish. I'm going to know a lot about these players. They do have deeper pockets than they showed in the regular season, especially Bomber, who hasn't played for quite some time. We haven't seen him since Quest and Costum were playing in the roster during most of the Division 1 regular season. But these two members on Eget and Beaumont, I think they may be bringing something out if game one goes better than the previous game that they had.
I do really, I really sort of have fond memories of Eget's from the Div 1, because there were a lot of times where what he was trying to do just straight up wasn't working. But he brought that creativity and he brought that invention and willingness to go forward. And against opposition which on paper obviously is potentially going to be a little bit lower, where overextend stakes won't necessarily be as punished as much, I think a player like that can have a lot of value to just say, go, and everyone else follows him in.
Yeah, and this is the meta where you want a support like that. Of course, there's Rexet on the opposite side who's been picking Pike, so that's also quite scary. But that's why I used the word explosive when we initially started this segment. Like, there's no telling what the most aggressive members on these teams are going to be bringing out. And it's going to be a slugfest eventually. They may be... I'm not sure if these two teams are going to swinging in game one already, or if they're going to play a little bit more conservative in game one to see what the other team is like trying to default to, and then build around that. Things like Smolder, for example, could be a thing that both teams can play around.
Yeah, I mean, it always is the question in these high-stakes best-of-5 series. You've got aggressive teams that so often find themselves playing back a little bit and a little reserved, and it always worries me a little bit, because when you've got a style that you want to play towards as a team, deviating from that in your most important games could really bite you in the arse more often than not, Garvis.
Yeah, and that's why I just, even though I'm Finnish, I have to give a small edge to 42 when it comes to this series. Like, just on the kickoff, I think 42 is they're able to come in this off of a win and well prepared to what Blue Whites are doing. They know what their weakness is, especially when it comes to late game from the series against Rich Gang, and they've had time to prepare their game plan, whether that be if Chrissy's feeling a very good day. We already saw during the Division 2 regular season what he can do when he gets those hyper carries, and even on a Jhin he can still put out quite a bit of work. Or they can, as you said, start cooking a little bit, get JJ and Bertoza on something weird, and try to catch Blue Whites off guard. So yeah, there's a lot to talk about here.
Yeah, Carvis, I can't believe that I'm having to come into bat for Blue Whites when I've got a Finnish caster alongside me. I think you can look at the scoreline for this team in Division 1, the 2-12. It's not a great record. But I think the really key thing to remember about Blue Whites is their progression throughout the split. They went 2-2 over their last 2 weeks, which is absolutely standard for the league that they're in. And it was very, very clear from minute go that this was a team that had quality. It's just about getting it all to work. And we saw that progression over the course of the split. Plays becoming a little bit cleaner, less Eget's doing some questionable things, and it all working holistically. And I think that chemistry is so important, because when you do find yourself put down like Blue Whites have been, falling out of that series against Rich Gang, now having to sort of fight for their lives to stay in Division 1, I think having a good team environment, having a group of players that have played together for a long time and all speak the same language of Finnish, I think that really gives you a little bit of something extra.
It really does. We've seen this like across the board in Finnish teams, whether that be in the FPL in like the 3rd division. Usually all Finnish-speaking teams do better than the ones that splash in some English, but we are ready to go into draft, and are we missing a ban? What?
Oh dear. That's not a great start for Blue Whites here. We'll get some word on what's going on there, I'm sure, in a little bit. Well, we mentioned the Smolder, not going to be seeing that in game 1. 42, though, taking away a few of these enabling picks, the Senna, the Seraphine, and that Zyra. Yones did play a game on it against Rich Gang, wasn't able to get the win, but still looked really damn good. Clears so quickly and provides so much damage. I'm getting word from production that missed ban is an Aurora, so we're not going to be able to see Virtuoso pilot that one, at least in game 1.
Yeah, the Aurora ban also makes sense. It's such a flexible pick between JJ and Virtuoso, but this leaves the Ziggs open. There has been a huge priority pick all throughout the regions. Can be flexed between the bot side and the mid, of course, but it's most likely going into Chrissy's hands. JJ will be playing some sort of an AD carry. That's usually the thing that 42 has been playing. But speaking of defaults, Blue-Whites, the Yo's back on the Vi, and Kai'Sa most likely going into the hands of MKR.
It's always sad to see a player like Yonez, who can play these carries, sort of into this more engaged role, but it's kind of just what jungle is at the moment. You're either playing AP or you're playing engage. I do love MKR on the Kai'Sa. The NLC one at regular split. Internet, which is not great.
Yeah, I was wondering. Turned into a robot for a little moment, but 42 doesn't care. They are okay. They're just going in. This is Skarner Pyke on blue second rotation. They want to fight, and they want to fight hard.
Yeah, and I think that the Pyke is just stylistically really great alongside the Ziggs. I think Ziggs has got a fair bit of unexpected damage in his kit, especially at early levels. But more than that, he's got safety. And what does Pyke want to do? Get out of that damn bot lane. As well, and this.
Oh no!
But wait, it's, oh, no. But hopefully it will resolve itself in just about the game.
But yeah, as you said, Middlecott, the Pyke is going to be able to roam around the map and sync up with Bombeef in the jungle. The Skarner is going to be much more lethal when you have the additional CC follow-up and the damage coming out from the Pyke. Rel lock-in, again, Blue-White's just sticking to the tried and true standard front-to-back style composition where you have the follow-up for the Vi and you can look for these plays on the bot side of the map and try to get MKR head. Ban's coming out though, focusing on the top side of the map from 42. Volux may have to bring something new out here.
Yeah, or he could just play on.
I mean, yes, but then you may fall victim to something Virtuoso has been cooking. K'Sante banned out as well. Blue-Whites trying to make sure that Virtuoso can provide the additional front line. They kind of do need it since Pyke isn't the traditional tank support that we see in Leona, Alistar, Rel providing that much needed front line. And Skarner, solo, not too exciting when it comes to like just...
He's a bit of a weird one. I feel like Skarner isn't necessarily the best like body that you can have. I think he's incredibly tanky and can put out a lot of damage, but wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable with him being the sole tank on your team. Moving into the second phase of picks here, Pomo gonna be picking up that Corki, and Carvis, I think we got something for this.
Lima Oscar Lima, we're off! The Corki's back! They are not deterred by the 2 game losses they had earlier, and they think Pomo will be able to shine on this once again.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you've already got that Kai'Sa as well, we've got this sort of pairing of 2 very high damage short range marksmen, but also both champions that can opt into a bit more of a poke role if MKR wants to incorporate some AP into his build, and then it just becomes so difficult for 42 to get on top of Blue-Whites. They're looking to change that though with the Yone lock-in, so much diving combination with the Pyke.
Yeah, this is just, we're going in the composition. There is no peel back, there is no the Ziggs. He's just there to throw as much stuff as he can at CC targets on the enemy team, as every single member on 42 is able to lock someone down. And I was a bit worried that the Ornn might get locked in. I like the Poppy way more here on the side of 42, but the lane might be a little bit rough. Or could we see it?
That's locked in. Okay. Well, this is definitely a little bit of a turn up for the script. Veloxa, we're talking about him as potentially a tank player, but absolutely not a tank pick for the Blue-White marksman. I mean, you've got a fair bit of lockdown there with the vibe, with the Rel, and so being able to drop a Rumbelow on top of that just increases your damage profile that much more.
Out of lane safely. This is a very good game for the Rumble. Everyone's going to be running at you. The Equalizer is going to be able to deal a ton of pain when paired up with the Rel's Magnus Storm. And it just feels like if on a straight 5-on-5 team fight where 42 doesn't get a catch initially, Blue Whites may just have locked in a team fight win if they're fighting on their own terms. But when it comes to side laning, that's where the issues are going to rise.
Yeah, I mean, you've got that Yone who's going to be absolutely indomitable, the Pyke that can move to those side lanes so quickly, and then the Mega Inferno Bomb from the Ziggs just for that extra little bit of damage from downtown really makes it difficult to contest them on the sides. But I like what you're talking about there, a fight on their own terms. The composition for 42, I think, is almost custom engineered to force fights that the opponent can't dictate.
Yeah, and Bommy, surprising absolutely no one, is going to be the key member to watch. You look for those fights. He is the one who has to sacrifice himself occasionally for